So I'm talking about from asset to impact. And the key thing about data is that it is an asset. And one of the key problems we have is that, according to Peter Drucker, writing in 1998, for the last 50 years we focused on technology. And we're very, very good at the technology. Well, with some exceptions. We're very good at the technology and building new technology, inventing new technology. A friend of mine, Peter Aiken, is an associate professor in university in the States, in computer science faculty. And he says that the part of the problem is we focus on the technology to the extent that a computer science graduate's answer, an IT professional's answer to almost any problem is build another database. When in doubt, build a database. What we need to be focusing on is the meaning of information and its purpose. What does this information mean in our organization and what are we using it for? And Jean spoke earlier on about the cookies directive. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later on. Because the cookies directive, in order to comply with it, one of the first things you need to be doing, or you should be considering doing, is thinking about the meaning and purpose of the cookies that you are writing on your websites, that you're using. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the first thing is, I want to justify this statement, information is an asset. Hands up here who is sick to the back teeth of hearing empty, vacuous buzzwords like the data asset. Okay, Brien, definitely. I agree with you. But information and data is an asset. It can be a liability as well. An asset, as defined by FSAB 9, the accounting standard that defines what assets are, is a probable future economic benefit obtained or controlled by an entity as a result of past transactions or events that has the capacity, either on its own or when used in combination with other assets, to contribute directly or indirectly to the future net cash flows of the business or the delivery of services. Just for a moment, I'm going to pop up the definition of personal data. There's an interesting, almost eerie parallel, either on its own or when combined with other data. Jump back, either on its own or when combined with other assets. So, information is an asset, and cookies, which I'll talk about later on, are an information asset. Because you can't create a cookie on someone's computer without there having been a transaction with that person. At least I'm not aware of any way in which that can happen outside of magic. My area of interest is information quality and data protection. I dabble in information security. And I make it very clear to people that I'm in the shallow end of information security. If you want to talk seriously about information security, you go to a properly qualified, recognized professional. There's one at the front of the room here. But if you want to talk, I do data protection, information quality. And there's big overlaps between these three areas. Okay? And these are three areas of discipline which enable you to govern your asset in the same way as you govern company cars, company stationery, staff, paper clips, pencils. Information quality and data protection overlaps in the context of, is it accurate and up to date? Is it relevant or not excessive? These are things you can measure about information. That if you're measuring them, helps you comply with your data protection obligations, but also gives you a heads up as to the quality of your information. Information security overlaps with data protection from the point of view of keeping it safe and secure, using appropriate measures to secure the information in your network and in transit, keeping it only as long as is needed, because the longer you're holding on to information, the longer you have the risk that someone's going to get in and get at it. Again, I hate to kick Sony, but why did they have data that was no longer active, that could be accessed? Ross O'Carroll Kelly, shred fucking everything. Dispose of it safely, shred everything. Information quality, information security overlap when you start thinking about who it is who is authorized to access the information you have. So I gave the example about the movers, levers process we implemented in the phone company as part of our compliance program. That was information quality, because the test was, is the person who has access to the system on the payroll, or are they a contractor? If they don't exist in a mechanism by which we are paying them, why do they have access? Shut them down. So you're relying on the completeness of the information and the consistency between HR data and your IT systems data. The example I give in this one from an information quality point of view is one of the team I worked with in the phone company. Her name was Rachel. And she spelled her name R-A-C-H-A-E-L, or as she put it, the right way. HR spelled her name R-A-C-H-E-L, which meant when we did the clash, she lost access to everything because IT spelled her name the right way, because all the people in IT were scared of Rachel because she'd worked with them and she knew them all. So all her IT access was set up with the right name. So on name matching, she was kicked out because first name didn't match. We suggested to IT that maybe doing a straight character for character comparison on name mightn't be the most reliable way. We suggested using fuzzy matching because we had the tools to do it. And we did that, and lo and behold, she got her access back, and we proved the benefit of an information quality approach to supporting information security. But ultimately, it all boils down, in terms of managing any asset, to identifying what information do you have or need, and for information, feel free to substitute the word bag of money. Okay? What bag of money do you have or need? Where is it? Who needs it? Who gets at it? Why do you have it? I often think the discussions we have around data protection, information quality, and information security will be a lot easier if people stop thinking about data as data and start thinking about it like a big bag of cash. Because you wouldn't leave a big bag of cash unsecured sitting under a desk. But people leave data unsecured under a desk. The common link between all of these things is the information, as Bill Clinton famously didn't say. The technology is just a tool. Technology helps you move information around faster. It helps you do good things faster. Importantly, it also helps you do bad things faster. 30 years ago, if you wanted to have the records of 250,000 customers, you would have needed a filing room about the size of this room, even if they were on one sheet of paper. Now, well, I've got an external hard drive that I bought in Aldi for €55. It's 500 gig. That would pretty much cater for the needs of storing the data about 250,000 people. Of course, the focus isn't on the information. The focus needs to be on the business objectives, the meaning and purpose of the information, which you're hoping to get to using the information. Okay? This is the mistake that IT people who try to drive information quality make. They focus on the data. We had in fact, revenue assurance people do this as well, because revenue assurance is information quality by a different name. Don't tell them that, they get very upset. I had a revenue assurance manager I dealt with in a client previously who was great at finding problems. That when we looked at it in terms of the business objective and the process, weren't actually problems. Information is the fuel to effective execution on your strategy and your goals. If your strategy is effective security, you need to have trustworthy information about what's going on, who can access your systems, who your contractors are who are authorized to touch data. Do you have proper contracts in place with them? Because you are obliged to, under Section 13 of the Data Protection Act, to have a written formal contract in writing with a data processor, etc. Also, this is the one that I really love funding out because I'm a lawyer by training. I did 4 years in UCD law faculty. Then I took tablets and lots of counselling, got better. But I love the directive which defines the principles for data quality, the 8 rules that make up the backbone of Section 2 of the Act. They're actually referred to as principles for data quality. Just so you can emphasize that, there's an arrow and a ring around it, principles for data quality, because data protection is at heart an expectation. When someone gives you their personal data, they expect you to do things in certain ways. So the fair processing notice, the privacy statement, etc. that you publish is your way of setting that expectation. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we talk about the cookies directive a little bit. 31. That is a very good example of data because it has no context. Do you want to see the context? Okay, 31%. Still data. A leading international luxury goods manufacturer writes off at least 31% of their direct marketing spend every year due to poor quality information. These guys aren't short of cash. The cheapest product they sell retails for €2,875. It's a tiny pair of earrings. But information quality impacts their core operation, their core business, to the tune of 35%. That's fairly consistent with industry studies which have shown the impact to be between 10 and 35% of turnover. Please note I said turnover, not profit. So what is information quality? Well, 3 definitions here. Okay, and I'm talking about quality because we're talking about assets. And there's no point having an asset that's not good. There's no point in having lots of apples in your shop if the apples are rotten. The degree to which all information data can be used as a trusted source, the degree to which it meets the specific needs of customers, consistently meeting or exceeding knowledge worker or end customer expectations. End customer expectations is an important phrase here, particularly when you think about getting people's consent. When you are considering things like fair obtaining and fair processing, lawful processing. That is the expectation. When you think about Rule 4, data must be kept safe and secure. That is an expectation. If you drop all your protections on your firewall, if you have one password for every system, the password is 1D10T, write it down, then have a laugh, you're not meeting the expectation. Data quality can be measured. Okay, so you can actually measure the quality of the asset and assess how well it's going to help you meet your objectives. And there's all these dimensions. Again, I apologize, they're a little bit difficult to read because there's a lot to include here. But you're talking things like enterprise agreement of usage. Is everyone agreed on what customer means? Is everyone agreed on who can use the customer data? Is everyone agreed on who can access the customer data? Is everyone agreed on where the customer data should sit? Security is a policy characteristic. Do you have a security policy? Is it followed? Was it written by Dame Barbara Cartland? Accuracy, completeness, consistency, currency, timeliness, well, they're all ones you see when you look at accurate, up to date, relevant, not excessive. These are all the specific data protection principles that are in the Act. Use of storage, well, where are you storing it? Is it on a laptop? Is the laptop encrypted? Is it on a server? Is the server in a comms room? Are you putting it into the cloud? Here's the thing, the Data Protection Acts and the Data Protection Commissioner don't particularly care where the data is, because the legislation is technology agnostic, because it relates to paper and electronic. Comprehensive, essential, relevant. There you go, relevant, not excessive. Completeness. If you don't have enough information to achieve your objective, why are you processing the rest of it? If you have 75% of what you need to achieve your goal, you have 2 options. 1, invest to get the other 25%, or 2, ditch the 75%, because you will not be able to achieve the specified lawful purpose for which you purport to be processing the information. Well, you can measure that. How much of your information can we actually use to do what it is we've said we wanted to do? And the way you influence the quality characteristics of the asset are through these. Variously called processes, information chains, cycles, which is a wonderful phrase that came into the vocabulary from Sarbanes-Oxley. A cycle is basically a lot of processes that you do over and over again. And the information flows through these. So you've got an input, an action, an output. And the key thing here is that someone or something is doing this. Someone or something is driving this. Someone or something is responsible for this. So by doodling a simple picture like this, when I say simple picture, I've done this in PowerPoint. There are some really good tools out there for doing this type of notation. You can identify who is actually driving this process. And you can identify who is doing it, what are they doing it for, who are the stakeholders. You can identify when are they doing it, when are they stopped from doing it. Are there particular business rules or conditions that prevent people from doing this process? For example, in financial services, if the bank account is opened by a minor, there are certain products and services you can't sell to that account holder. So that might stop you from using that data. When are they finished doing it? What indicates that the process that people are doing has been completed? Is there a call to action in your marketing activity that you want people to actually feed back to say, yes, we want to receive more stuff from you. Please mail us till our ears bleed. Or is there some other thing that indicates that the process is finished? And also, when do people start doing it again? Is it an annual process? Is it a quarterly process? Is it a monthly process? Is it your billing process? What are they doing? Well, the what's here are what are they doing it with, what do they need to do it? So this is a case of, are they doing it in Excel? Should we buy them a business intelligence tool that will actually be more secure? Are they doing bulk emails in Microsoft Outlook? Should we maybe invest in a compliant bulk mailing tool? The Department of Foreign Affairs had a minor breach over the weekend when they accidentally included the details of 300 journalists in the to line of an email about credentialing for Obama's visit. What are the key quality characteristics of the information? By key quality characteristics, I mean, what are the things that stop you doing what it is you are intending to do with this asset? If you have a car and you're putting fuel in the car, one of the key quality characteristics is, if it's diesel, car, put diesel fuel. If you mix them up, as an ad on the radio makes quite light of, but it has happened to me, where a garage put petrol in my diesel car. Car doesn't run no more. Expensive engine refit. And what might stop people from doing this process? Is there a regulatory issue that might stop people from doing it? Is there something in the data? If you find that the data is below a threshold, say you're doing a postal campaign and you're targeting a particular geographical area, and you find that only 20% of the data has the data you need to do that targeting. Does that stop the process? Or do you go with the 20%? And what is the purpose? How does this process get done? What are the IT systems that are interacting? How do they interact? And what technology is there to support it? If you're sending people out into the field with portable devices, well, that's good. How is that technology being deployed to support? You can capture address data, you can capture customer details, take orders, etc. More timely uploading, etc. But what are the IT systems that need to interact to make all that happen securely? Why are we doing this is the first question, and why are we not doing something else is another equally important question, particularly in today's economic climate. I did some analysis with a client a couple of years ago. It was a pro bono gig I did while I was still in the phone company. I looked at what they were doing in a not-for-profit organisation, and I found that about 20% of what they were doing, processing data, actually didn't have any objective. People were doing it because it had always been done that way. So a little bit of rejigging, we found that they could save time and put people on other things. Did the same analysis in the phone company, pretty much the same result as well. The key thing is that if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Okay, no matter what you say you were doing, if you can't describe it as a process, if you can't describe what the steps are, what the inputs are, and who is actually responsible for those things, you haven't got a clue what you were doing in your organization. That's W. Edwards Deming, the father of quality management, said that. Now, the important thing about processes is, if I'd wanted to know what you did on your holidays, I'd have asked you. Now, one of the most common problems I encounter when I'm dealing with people asking about processes is I get something like this in a Word document, 600 pages long, or 20 pages long, and it's bullet point text telling me the steps in the process. That's lovely, because I suffer from insomnia, and documents like that are perfect for nodding me off to sleep. What you need to know is the activity step, who does it, and what tools are being used. What's the triggering event? What's the output? Where does that feed into another step? So you get something like this. So this is an example of what you need to know for an online event booking site. Delegate decides to go to an event, they book the ticket using the event booking site, they capture the details, we process payment, and we use PayPal as one of the systems here. Great. Lots of information here about what goes on. Offline payment, there's a process here that goes on. We say, oh, the delegate is involved and the event leader is involved here, they have to do something. And the delegates here and the marketing team are here and they have to do something. So very quickly you can see in a simple picture who does what, when and why. You can also, if you want, identify, well, which systems are in the cloud. I count PayPal as being in the cloud because it's not hosted on my own server under my desk or in my comms room. You can also identify end user computing. So the marketing team are using Microsoft Excel here. Why? What is happening with that data? Are they then storing that data in an unencrypted Excel spreadsheet on a laptop for no reason? Because the purpose of engaging with the marketing campaign is a monthly process cycle that has an end point and a start point. And we need to be very conscious of the end point, because at the end point, the specific purpose for that instance of processing has ended. And it's in Excel. Excel's not you need to ask the question, why aren't they just driving it straight out of Salesforce, which has that capability anyway? Questions you can ask is, what are the data formats which need to be complied with for passing the information through? Whose problem is it to ensure that if there's different formats, that can be prevented? And how do they go about doing that? Do you put a bit of middleware in? Do you have someone manually rekeying information? What are the risks involved in all of that? Who's the data steward? Are the emails for offline payment set up with the right details? So if you're using that process flow, for example, you have the offline payment, where we send the customer, the attendee, an email saying, please transfer the funds to this bank account. I was involved in an event in the UK a few years ago where they sent out the wrong bank account details for people, the wrong EFT details. So the money got paid into the wrong account. And admittedly, it was an account in the same company, but it made their post-event accounting more difficult because they had to go back and track, because they had a bank account set up for the event and they were doing a profit share with people, and suddenly there was no money in the account because it had all gone to a different account because the wrong information was in the email. If you're accepting a purchase order, do you have a process to reconcile that purchase order with the invoice you sent out? Because you kind of need that for auditing purposes. And you need to be able to answer that question there. Why Spock why? Where are the key areas of risk? If you think back to the process map, the key areas of risk will be your cloud providers. You're relying on their security. If they are claiming to be PCI DSS compliant, well, you are relying on their testimony that they are PCI DSS compliant. If they are processing personal data on your behalf, you are relying on their undertaking to keep the data safe and secure. And if they're in the US, you're relying on them to actually be registered with Safe Harbor and understand what that actually means. Or you have to put in place other contractual controls. What are the risks of interchange between systems? If people are taking that data down into Excel, what's the risk? Well, it's out of control, it can be emailed, it can leak out of your organization. How can you trust your marketing department? Can someone put that on a memory stick and bring it home with them and keep it? And the key question with the Excel spreadsheets or any end user computing is, when the process is finished, is the data being destroyed and can you prove that? What data quality factors are most likely to derail your objective? What attributes of the asset will prevent you from having the impact you want? Example, junk mail, yes, no. This is an actual example from a billing system that I worked on a few years ago as part of a migration to a CRM system. There was a field in the billing system, junk mail, yes or no. So can anyone tell me, does that, if I answer yes to that question, does that mean that I want junk mail? If I answer no to that question, does that mean that I want junk mail? There was no way to actually judge what the intent behind that field was because it was badly designed. We asked the question, 50% of the people said, yes, junk mail yes means that they want junk mail. And other people said, no, junk mail no means that they don't, it means that they do want, they want not to be blocked from receiving junk mail. People convoluted it in a very difficult way. The assumption no means no doesn't always hold. Who in your organization is responsible for the external system? So if you're dealing with external providers, again going back to the disaster recovery plan, the crisis management plan, who is responsible for that thing? Who can you task with getting the answers if, for example, Salesforce.com is hacked? Okay, Salesforce spent a lot of money to make sure they're as bulletproof as possible, but there's always a risk. So who is the person who is your point of contact with Salesforce to chase that issue for your disaster recovery plan? And the key thing is, are any cookies being written as part of this process? Again, I used the web-based process for a reason, to bring me to this point in the presentation. And if you are writing cookies, what data is being written, and how comfortable are you that you're able to comply with the cookies directive coming into effect tomorrow? Just to summarize, the key thing of it is meaning and purpose. You need to clearly understand the meaning and purpose of your information. This is one of my favorite DealBook cartoons ever, from year 2000. We have a gigantic database full of customer behavior information. DealBook talks about some wonderful business intelligence stuff, and the PHB's answer is, if that's attending a spam, we're having a good meeting. Okay, so the purpose of your information is very, very important, and everyone has to agree. Enterprise agreement of usage. What are we using this for? What is the meaning of this information? What is the purpose of this information in the organization? With cookies, what are you using the cookies for? What do they mean? What is their purpose? Are you enabling functionality that the customer wants? For example, if you're using font resizers, some of those font resizers for accessibility write a cookie, so the next time the person who is visually impaired visits your site, the site can be presented differently because they references the cookie and the cookie instructs the site to use a different style sheet. Are you tracking people's preferences? Are you storing customer details? Are you tracking the existence of advertising and how people respond to it and react to it? All the things that Jean talked about earlier on. That's the purpose. What is a cookie? Well, everyone assumes a cookie is just a text file that you find in your cookies folder or your temporary directory, but Flash writes cookies as well. They're called Flash locally stored objects. So when you visit YouTube and you pause the video, that writes a cookie and says, right, when the person clicks on play again, you reference it from this point, not from the beginning. A lot of e-learning products, when you stop your e-learning course and walk away and come back and it miraculously knows where you had finished, that's because they're using a Flash locally stored object. Now, that's technically a cookie as well. So, what's the purpose of that? This is a slightly unfair example. I took a quick look at LinkedIn and the cookies LinkedIn writes. I am not saying for one moment that LinkedIn is in any way potentially in breach of the cookies directive. I must make that explicitly clear. But it's an example of the type of data that can get written in a cookie. So they have a cookie called _Leo_profile, and they have content in here which I've blanked out some of it there, but that's basically a numeric string. And it's got it's a month-long expiry date on it. Now, when you actually put that string into LinkedIn, it brings up my profile. Now, you have to be logged in for it to bring up my profile. You may have to be logged in as me for it to bring up my profile. But LinkedIn has written a cookie with an identifier for me for the purposes of allowing me to go back in and look at my profile without having to log in again. That's very nice of them. Thank you very much. That saves me about 15 seconds every time, or 92 seconds every time I change my passwords and can't remember them. So you log in, if you use it without being logged in, this is what you see. So that's what tells me it's for my purposes only. It suggests to me it's for my purposes only. And my assumption is that it helps keep, in combination with a session ID cookie and other things, it helps identify that I've been on LinkedIn before, recently, and therefore it's not going to ask me for my username and password again. That's very kind of them. So the meaning of the information in this context is a unique identifier for an account profile that can uniquely identify an individual, or to put it in data protection terms, a piece of data which on its own or used in conjunction with other information which is likely to come into the possession of the data controller can uniquely identify a living individual. The cookie is used, from what I can see, to simplify user interactions, to allow me to just go onto LinkedIn and see everything without having to log back in again every time. That's nice. Thank you very much, LinkedIn. But is it strictly and explicitly necessary? Maybe LinkedIn should consider flagging that that's an optional feature. If you want not to have to log in, tick here. That will write cookies to your computer, to your device, to allow us to identify you, and those cookies will expire after a month, so at most every month you will have to log in again. And by the way, when you're logging in again, it might be an idea every month to change your password, which will improve your security. Again, I'm not saying for one instant that LinkedIn have a problem here. I'm just using this as an example of where understanding the meaning and purpose of information, which is contained in a cookie, can help you understand what the implications might be for your ability to comply with the directive, and where you can have opportunities to improve your dialogue and your communication with customers and encourage them to undertake other behaviours which might improve their security as well. Unlike Facebook, who keep asking me for my mobile phone number because it'll make my account more secure. Understanding where your data comes from helps you understand if it's fit for purpose. Apologies to anyone from marketing. Information drives your strategy and outcomes, okay? When you're embarking on a strategic plan, you look at information, you pull information left, right, and center to get a view of what the market is, what the direction is. And the quality of the information you're using for that affects the quality of the outcome. 31% of direct marketing spend in a major international consumer goods company written off due to poor quality information. Quality has a number of dimensions. And really we should be getting people to say, okay, I'm glad that the boss is asking if the data will be accurate. That's where we want to get people to in terms of valuing information as an asset. Can I trust the information? An example of what happens if inaccurate data is used in the absence of a governance framework and processes to identify and act on errors, again, the detective control we spoke about in the crisis management presentation. An 8-year-old boy, well, he's now 16, his mother went to a GP because she was feeling unwell. GP arranged for her to go to an oncologist, but due to a typo, the letter was sent to the wrong address. Every letter was sent to the wrong address. By the time the mother got to see an oncologist, she had gone from having a 93% probability of surviving to having 0% probability of surviving. In fairness to the GP's practice in question, they stood up in court and they said, yeah, we screwed up here, we should have followed up. They lacked any form of detective or reactive control to see where the letters were going and why patients weren't making their appointments. And that's where having an awareness of your information quality can influence your data protection and can prevent bad outcomes from happening. Ultimately, it's all about governing your information asset. And if you sit down and think about what you're doing, think about the flow of information, think about who's doing what, when and why, you go a very good way towards having governance in place of your asset, and you can affect the quality of the outcome through the quality of the information and the quality of the process. And you can also identify the risks and put in place proper plans to prevent them from happening.